Chapter 21. Dakota. Searching frantically around the quiet house, with only the sound of her bare feet making a squishing sound on the hardwood floors, looking for something to wear, Dakota found her jacket hanging in a closet near the foyer. Pulling it off the hanger and sliding it over her shoulders, she passed a mirror. She really looked a sight. Hair spiked in disarray on her head. Half-dressed, if she could call it that, which she couldn't. She was naked and running around like a banshee in a vampire's home. It was a good thing Walker had been sent to Seattle on an errand and told not to disturb them until tomorrow, or Dakota wouldn't have the opportunity to run around naked, and she would be locked in the room with Ashton. She thought this time would be different. It was different. Now she knew she had made the mistake of her young life. "Well, it's never too late to learn," she murmured, easing her arms into her jacket. Dakota would have thought by now she would be lying in Ashton's arms watching his handsome face as he slept, since she had become a night person. She would be sleeping along with him, but he wasn't the same person she knew at the hospital, and yet he was. Maybe she had been enthralled with him and hadn't noticed the wickedness which surfaced during their lovemaking. Perhaps she didn't know enough about the person she had fallen in love with, which could sustain a relationship such as theirs. Judging Ashton by her childish standards, Dakota had overlooked a few things. 1. He was older and more matured and sophisticated than she. Especially with sex and what he found satisfying. His world of sex and bondage had existed for hundreds of years, and Dakota had just learned of its existence. Thinking she could enter into that world had proven to be the worst experience of her life, because she hadn't understood, and because she hadn't developed a taste for it. All she knew was the kind of sexual satisfaction where a woman meets a man, and if they are attracted to each other, that's all that mattered, and that's all they needed to stay in love with each other. Clearly, this was not the world of a vampire. Dakota's world had been filled with nothing. No excitement, no sex before Ashton. And there she was with a creature who lived many lifetimes and had many women. It must be difficult to satisfy a sexual thirst that's been with you for hundreds of years, Dakota mumbled as she searched the cabinets for a morsel of bread, anything that's edible. Because of her deep love for Ashton, she found an excuse for him where she couldn't judge him too harshly. She knew he wasn't right for her, but in her heart she couldn't forget him. Dakota remembered the tenderness Ashton showed her when she discovered he was a vampire, and his sexual desires were varied, constant, and enormous. How could she forget that moment when he entered her, thinking he had hurt her, and being apologetic of being too hard when he took her virginity? Ashton had lived another life and many lives compared to her. She had never seen or experienced the things he had. She was out of her depths, and she knew it, and that's why she was getting the hell out of his home and away from him. Dakota didn't live that kind of life, of master and submissive. She didn't know where she would be headed if she remained with Ashton, and she didn't want to know. "Walker must have some kind of food in the pantry," she murmured. She put her hands on something. A box of crackers. "At least it's edible." "I have to find something to cover my ass," she said, stuffing a cracker in her mouth. Searching in one empty closet and drawer after the next, she moved on to a large buffet chest with drawers. Why does Ashton need a buffet table? She found nothing. Then she glanced up and thought about the closet nearby. Good, a linen closet. And there she found a tablecloth. She quickly draped it around her like a sarong, after dropping her leather coat on the chair and then placing her leather coat over her shoulders to keep her from the cold. "I feel better now," she whispered into the fresh, crisp air. Dakota stared one more time at the chest. Then she got it. These were all the things she would need if she had planned to marry Ashton. He said this would be her home. He left it vacant on purpose, so she could buy the furniture to make this place a home for them. Her eyes filled with tears. She placed her thumb on it. "Why am I so sad?" she thought. "What does he have to do to you before you get it?" "Dakota," she whispered, as the tears fell down her cheek and drowned in her mouth. After inhaling and exhaling, she realized what she needed to do. Get a hold on herself. My feelings for Ashton are getting in the way of me doing what I'm supposed to do. Like getting the fuck out of here. Standing on weak legs, looking out at the grounds, she fell in love with the property. Beautiful white and pink wildflowers, and pale yellow seasonal flowers everywhere she looked. The spray of color everywhere, signaling the coming of spring. She looked out the windows for longer than she wanted to. As far as she could see, manicured grass, large lush trees lining a path of stone, and a gazebo. She narrowed her eyes. Is that really a gazebo? She whispered. It is. What was that doing at the end of the flagstone path? She wondered. Large antique lamps on poles positioned along the pathway, and the lights dimmed as the sun rose. Lovely. And Dakota sighed, and gave out a soft moan for what she would be leaving behind. Something she didn't think she wanted, a husband and a home. All she wanted was to go to school and have a career. Now that's in jeopardy, along with everything else in her life. How did it come to this? She wondered. Not even 20 and her life is in turmoil. She dropped into an overstuffed chair and watched the sunrise. Realizing that Ashton had prepared her for a wedding at this home, she couldn't move. A house he purchased for her. What other surprises did he have? She let out a full breath and leaned forward, hiking her left leg up and tucking one foot under the leg resting on the floor. She put her rolled fingers under her chin and sighed. Sadness and tears welled up once more. This time she held it back. What kind of marriage and life would this be? She wondered. She wanted to become a scientist, and he already was a scientist. Maybe it wasn't a far-fetched idea to wed Ashton. They had the same interest. They wanted to discover that which would make humanity better. If he could find a cure for the infliction vampires brought with them, then it would be worth it. And they could be together. There wouldn't be an Elizabeth to come between them. Dakota reasoned she could satisfy all his needs. They could hunt together on this property and eat what they killed. They could have a life, Dakota thought. It wasn't just wishful thinking. Ashton may have thought this through, but Dakota hadn't. Her sadness came back as she saw the magnificent sunrise over the horizon. She could never sit and watch the sunrise or the sunset with Ashton unless they could find a cure for him. The ocean view's merely beautiful, and she would only be able to share that with Ashton only at night. But that wouldn't be so bad, she thought. They could watch the stars together when the sky was clear and hold hands like any married couple in love. Then Dakota woke to reality. How could this work? She didn't know how close he was to find his cure. Maybe a few years or perhaps 100. He had time, she had none. And the sex part. He had been in a BDSM vampire lifestyle she knew nothing of, and he knew plenty. He had enjoyed that part, and like an addiction, when it came time for him to resist it, he fell into it and embraced it, if for a few mornings nonetheless, he enjoyed it and didn't want to walk away from it. Not even Dakota's love was as strong as that BDSM lifestyle and Elizabeth's hold over Ashton. Elizabeth represented all of Ashton's sordid past, represented with the sadistic drinking of the blood of humans, and the idea of master and submissive incorporated into the ritual where there existed pleasure and pain. In the vampire rituals, they would drain the humans of blood and keep some around for sex. In Ashton and Elizabeth's world, he would begin the pain and punishment stage for Elizabeth, where he would whip her, and then plunge his blistering rock-hard cock into her anus, hating everything about her on every violent push into her ass. Ashton tried to break her apart, but Elizabeth enjoyed his rage because his rage brought him closer to her. Brought him closer to be what he was before, a murdering, sexual, sadistic vampire. Leaving him and never seeing Ashton again would be the hardest thing she had ever done, but she had to, for her own life, and it would be even harder than she could imagine. But it had to be done if she were to live out her life. The only life she knew before Ashton. Her heart ached inside as if she had been hollowed out, and not even the beautiful thoughts of marriage to him could fill the pain she had inside her. It was the betrayal that she couldn't get past, and she didn't know how because it hurt so much seeing her beautiful man lying in bed after he had taken Elizabeth the way she wished he could have taken her. But Dakota didn't know how to live with Ashton, and she didn't know how to live without him, but she had to try this one last time. Composing herself, she took a deep breath and blew it out. She rose from her comfortable position to search around the room, and in a crystal bowl she found her purse and inside her phone. The only person she could call who would understand was Thomas. Elliot and Paige had embraced that vampire lifestyle, and she feared for Paige, so she forgot about her for a moment and concentrated on her only friend left, Thomas. Then she remembered that she had deserted him entirely and hadn't called or texted to see if he was okay or not. She had been caught up in her own selfish drama. She didn't blame him if he never talked to her again. That is, if he was alive. Her heart lurched inside her chest when he didn't answer. Thomas's phone rang and rang. When she was ready to give up, Thomas answered. "What do you want?" His voice cold. His tone intolerant. "Don't be angry," Dakota droned into the phone. "You leave me at a BDSM vampire club, where a good night is when they whip your ass until the blood flows. And you can imagine what happens next: tie you up, lay your naked ass across a bench, stick things in your anus if you're a man, and then fuck you within an inch of your life if you're lucky, and you tell me don't be angry. I wish I had never met you." Thomas's words were hurtful to Dakota. His voice enraged, tone heated and disgusted. In a moment she calmed herself and gathered her thoughts. Dakota wondered if Thomas exaggerated the situation. Because if all that had happened to him, he would be a walking corpse by now, and there was no way he would be able to talk to her in a loud voice, and apparently it was him on the phone. "You didn't mean to say those hurtful things, Thomas. We're still friends, aren't we? I love you too. Are you okay?" "No. It wasn't that bad, but it could have been. Those poor fucks that gave themselves freely to become one of those things had it much worse. Your friend Paige found me in time and stopped one of those fiends from, well, let's just say from doing something unpleasant to me. Maybe unpleasant is not strong enough a word for what those things were planning." He paused for a long minute. He had gotten that off his chest. "What have you gotten yourself into now?" he said to Dakota. Dakota could hear the sigh over the phone, as if he knew there would be an answer he couldn't handle. He was feeling very vulnerable, realizing he could be close to death or worse, being fucked and torn apart by a sadistic male vampire. And it wouldn't be any better if it was a female. He saw the females do far worse to their victims. "I need you to bring me some clothes. I'm at Ashton's place." "Why is that not a surprise? I thought as much. There's nothing that has happened to you that Ashton hasn't caused. When are you going to wake up? When you have become like him and dragged me with you?" "It's over. It better be over, because I don't have enough life to see this to its conclusion. Don't bother with the commentary, now save it for when I see you. Now take down these directions and don't bother getting down. Keep the engine idle. I'll look for you." Locating the address on his GPS, Thomas said, "This is a new place. Miles from where I am. Maybe an hour or less. Come now. Don't waste time talking. It's a long story, and I'll tell you everything on our ride to the apartment." Dakota hit the red button and glanced around one last time. How could she fit her life into Ashton's? She couldn't. She didn't like pain, and no one was her master. She was the master of her fate. Chapter 22. Dakota. "Drive, Thomas. Get me out of here." When Dakota spotted Thomas's car, she came barreling out of the house, down the walkway and stairs, before Walker could drive up and stop her. She didn't know if he would. But she wasn't taking a chance. Walker wouldn't likely make the same mistake again, but Ashton had sent him on errands and given him 2 days off. Therefore, Dakota thought she had time. Thomas put the car in drive and shot off down the road with tires screeching on asphalt leading away from the large beachfront home. Dakota reached in the back and opened a bag with a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. "Where are my shoes?" "You didn't say shoes." "We're going to the apartment, anyway. I don't think no one will notice on a Sunday whether you have shoes on or not. We have nothing but rich young entitled fucks living there who have been on drunken sprees and full of tattoos. They want to forget who they fucked last night and won't be paying attention to your feet. And it's early." He turned to Dakota. "Not unless you want to stop off and go shopping for a pair." Thomas narrowed his eyes and she twisted her mouth. They both knew what that meant. Nervous, Thomas held the wheel tight and turned back to look ahead at the road. Dakota observed something peeking out from under his shirt sleeve, beside the fine dark hair on his arm. Pushing Thomas's unbuttoned sleeve up, Dakota raised the sleeve higher, and on his inner arm, she spotted a tattoo of a skull and crossbones. "Cute, Thomas. You've been busy," she said, tracing the tattoo. Jerking his arm away from her fingers, he said, "You should be lucky I didn't get turned, or you would be riding with one of those zombies. You know they don't turn them right away. The ones they want to serve them, they suck their blood a little at a time." "I know, Elizabeth did that to Elliot, and because of that she has to die. I don't know when and I don't know how, but I will kill that vampire." "You've been saying that?" "I wish you would," Thomas said. "I will. I just don't know enough, and I don't know how to find them." "Tell me about your tattoo," Dakota said. Thomas paused and thought about that night. Then he said, "I was so drunk that I needed something to remind me that I was alive. The pain from that shit sobered me up, and that's the only reason why I'm here today, fucking driving you around after you left me for dead." "You're not dead, Thomas. I've moved on, why can't you? Now don't look over here while I get dressed." Thomas couldn't take his eye off the road because of the winding road and the watch out for deer signs posted along the route. After passing the sign, he relaxed. Raising an eyebrow, he looked ahead and not at Dakota. He wasn't feeling too good about her just yet. As the car sped down the road, she gazed out the window as she pulled up her jeans and placed her t-shirt over her head. Then she tossed the tablecloth into the bag. There was a wilderness surrounding the property full of deer, and she didn't know what else. It was tucked away and not visible from the roads. There were trees and high bushes, and as they neared the highway, streams cut through the property. Signs posted that Ashton Mieres owned acres and acres of land were everywhere Dakota looked. Most were fenced off near the home, but here there were no fences. Just beautiful land with purple and off-white wildflowers dotting the landscape. The road turned into a highway, and then after a mile or so, Thomas's car took a curve onto the interstate. The car was going at an even pace, and the traffic moved along. Thomas felt comfortable with more cars on the road. "Ronin has been looking for you," Thomas said, breaking his silence, his dark eyes straight ahead as he navigated the car in the traffic. Dakota turned to Thomas with a gloomy, pale look. "I'm going away, Thomas." He slowed the car and got in the farthest right lane on hearing her announcement. "What did you say?" His brow furrowed, eyes narrowed, and he turned his head to face her and then turned back. "I said I'm leaving. With Ronin." She bit her lower lip. "Did you tell Ashton?" "Why would I tell Ashton? I haven't even told Ronin yet." "That answers everything. Do you know what that will do to that crazy fucking vampire? No one will be safe around him. And to leave with his mortal enemy, a werewolf?" Thomas took in a long breath and then exhaled. Dakota shook her head. "We aren't suited for each other. And his mortal enemy is his brother Morgan and that bitch Elizabeth." "You think?" "No shit." Thomas said, surprised that Dakota had discovered the truth, at least part of the truth. In Thomas's thinking, Ashton was more an enemy to himself than to even Elizabeth or Morgan or Ronin. "If I could, I would get rid of them," Dakota said. "Seattle isn't safe with them roaming around, creating secret societies to get innocent young people into their fucking cults. We need to kill those vampires." Dakota stared straight ahead, her eyes fixed, her smile bleak and tight. "All of them?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement coming out of Thomas's mouth. However, he took offense at the mention of the word "we." "Not Ashton?" Dakota said. Thomas didn't think Dakota knew what she wanted to do. Because if she went around trying to kill Morgan and Elizabeth, she would have to kill Paige, Elliot, and Ashton, and she loved them all. And Thomas wasn't going to be a party to any of that, because he liked living. Even if it stunk to high heaven now. Thomas knew what Dakota proposed about Ronin. It wasn't the best idea she had. It may have been her worst, along with killing vampires. How is that going to work out? A vampire and a human. An immortal and a mortal. A werewolf and a human. A vampire and a werewolf and a human in the middle. Stop me when I've forgotten something. I could have told you that this will never work out. If you had asked me, which you didn't, I could have saved you a lot of heartaches. Maybe I did tell you, and now here we are. And I'm telling you now, this will never fucking work out. He looked to Dakota, who sat with a blank look on her face as she gazed ahead, as if she hadn't heard a word he said. Thomas continued when Dakota didn't respond. Perhaps she didn't hear him. "Do you think that the werewolf is better for you? Does he or his pack know that you've been cohabitating with a vampire? I'm trying to be delicate. But maybe you would prefer me to say fucking instead. That's what you've been doing. Fucking a vampire." "Stop, Thomas. That doesn't sound like you." "I'm using harsh words because I don't think you heard me. Maybe I have your attention now? Do I have a choice with whom I live with? If Ronin doesn't want me, then Morgan will come for me. No man who is human can protect me, and that will put Ashton in jeopardy. I don't want Elizabeth and Morgan to kill him over me. You talk about them killing Ashton, what about me? Ashton will think I'm hiding you, and he might do anything. I don't want a love-crazed vampire after me. Ashton isn't like that. And you think when he finds out that you've left him without so much as a goodbye, that he will give a fuck if he kills me because I won't tell him where you are? He thinks he's dead without you, and he won't give a fuck about anything or anyone. He cared because you were in his life. He was trying to find a way to be with you as a human. And that deceiving vampire bitch Elizabeth and that sadistic brother Morgan confused him and fucked him up. How do you know that, Thomas? The owner of that club you left me at is Morgan. I saw firsthand what he does to humans, and I heard him tell Elizabeth that if he couldn't get rid of Ashton or addict him to human blood and stop his research, then they will have to kill him. Ashton will give himself to them to die if he can't be with you. Why are you telling me this? I can't live like this. I didn't choose who I fell in love with, and now I'm trying to change the dynamics of my life and everyone's life by going away. You will change everything, but you will not affect the changes you want. I'm just a friend, and I experienced the loss when you said you're leaving with Ronin. If the girl I love said that I couldn't be in her life any longer, then I wouldn't want to live. Males don't fall in love often, but when they find the one that makes them feel human, and trust me, not all men are human, and the only way they can be human is because a woman makes them that way. It's not a natural thing for a man to be human, you know. No. I didn't. I'm hearing this for the first time. Dakota turned away as the car pulled up in the underground parking space. When they stepped out of the vehicle, Ronin stepped from the darkness into the dim-lit garage. Thomas froze, his eyes large. Then he saw it was Ronin standing like a specter wearing a dark blue black-colored lumberjack shirt and blue jeans. Thomas's shoulders fell in a natural position. He huffed out a large breath and said, "You two need to talk. I'm going ahead and open the apartment. I'll be in my room if you need me, Dakota." He nodded to Ronin, and then he entered the elevator ahead of them. Dakota looked a mess, and she felt uneasy, but Ronin thought she looked sexy wearing no shoes and her hair tossed over her eye. Standing in the dim-lit garage, Ronin said as his eyes roamed from Dakota's hair to her feet, "We shouldn't stand here long. The cement is cold, and you have nothing on your feet. You don't look like you've slept very well either," Ronin said, as Dakota tried to wipe the guilty look from her face. "I've had a few sleepless nights," Dakota said with a trembling lip. Hesitating a moment, she walked over to the elevator with Ronin trailing behind her a few paces. The elevator stopped on the garage floor, and a young blonde man stepped out, surprised to see the tall and imposing Ronin with a woman with no shoes. He looked down at her feet and said, "Hard night?" When he got no reply, he continued on to his car. They heard a beep before he entered his black and white Jeep Wrangler and drove off. Ronin extended his hand to let Dakota inside first. Silence filled the small elevator, where there wasn't any room for more people or silence. They stepped out of the elevator, both looking at each other. When they walked a few more paces, they were in front of Dakota's apartment door. Ronin didn't ask her if he could come in. He took it as a natural thing. But it wasn't natural, because he had never been to her apartment, and she had never thought to invite him, even though he had hinted at it many times after work. Dakota closed the door once Ronin strode inside. "Please sit down. You have a nice place here. Are you happy? I never would have been able to afford it if you hadn't felt sorry for me and given me a job. I would have given you the world if you wanted it." Dakota smiled at the handsome werewolf. Tall and magnificent and attractive as Ashton. But she wasn't in love with him the way she loved Ashton. "Trust me," Ronin said, "it wasn't because I had been magnanimous. It was selfishness on my part. I couldn't get you out of my mind. I thought about you night and day, and I came to one conclusion, that I would go against my pack and ask you to marry me. Would you marry me?" It was as if a sledgehammer beat on her chest, and she couldn't move. When she gathered her faculties, she replied, "Would you go against your pack?" "Yes, I would. I would give up everything for you. I would risk my alpha status and be ostracized by the pack." "But why me?" "I don't know. It happens to a werewolf once in a lifetime. We mate for life. My only worry is that you will not accept my proposal. Please say yes." "I don't know, Ronin. I can't make a commitment to you just yet." Dakota's answer was as selfish as Ronin's. She felt something profound for him, but she couldn't get Ashton out of her mind. "Come home with me, and then you decide whether you would want to marry me. You appear to need a rest. On my island, you will have all the rest you require. My pack is in the city now taking care of our businesses. They won't return until the end of the vampire hunting season. I'll keep you on the payroll and let my brothers take over the day-to-day running of our family business. I'll go if you promise me that you will teach me to hunt and teach me survival skills. Then we're almost there. I'll make arrangements, and you can tell your friend he can keep the apartment. My treat. After all, I own it."